Hi, this is Nadine the Gluten-Free RN. Welcome back to the Gluten-Free RN podcast. Today on episode 15, we are going to talk about emergency preparedness for people with food intolerances or celiac disease. Lots of great information for everyone, not just for people with food intolerances or celiac disease. So stay tuned. This is going to be a great episode of Gluten-Free RN podcast. Hi, this is Nadine the Gluten-Free RN, and today we're going to talk about emergency preparedness. Emergency preparedness is always in the news, and we are reminded frequently about how important it is to be prepared for many different types of emergencies. And what is an emergency? Well, it can be a fire, it can be an earthquake, depending on where you live, it can be a flood. There's many different ways to have to deal with emergency situations. And today we're going to talk about how to really do that, how to stock your pantry so that you have the staples available to you in the event of an emergency. Now, there's many different ways that you can be caught in an emergency, and we'll go through some of those. How it's important to have an important stock of things in your cupboards, but also have a backpack in your car and a stash of food at work, wherever that may be for you. And if you do travel, to always make sure that you have some type of food that will sustain you through any type of delay or emergency where you have to have food that you can eat safely and not run into problems. Now, I'm a nurse, as you probably well know by the name, Nadine the Gluten-Free RN, but I'm also a CEN, and that means I'm a certified emergency room nurse. And what that means is I'm certified in my specialty of what I did for 17 years of my career, which was basically to work as an emergency nurse, dealing with emergencies, or what people perceive to be emergencies. So, addedly, I have a little bit of experience since I responded to Katrina. Do you remember that Hurricane Katrina, which is another type of emergency type situation depending on where you live, that you might run into? So I responded as a nurse to Katrina, and we were deployed to Lake Charles, which is in Louisiana. And it was not at all what I expected. I didn't actually have, I think, too many expectations other than what I saw in the news. But then when I got there, everything I thought I knew changed, and what was required of me as a nurse was way different than what I thought would be required of me as a nurse. I also paid very close attention to the circumstances that people were in and how they coped with that, and also what my preconceived notion of the people that I would be dealing with were all about, and how a lot of that was, just false. So I learned a lot. It was a great experience, and I'm going to bring some of that information to you today on this episode, because since I did have that experience and I did see what people had to go through, and, honestly, I don't think those people had any opportunity to be prepared for an emergency. It happened so quickly and so really decidedly that there was no preparation that could have been taken under those circumstances for many of those people. But it gives us a peace of mind. I know it does for me, to know that if there was a disaster or there was a reason I couldn't leave my house for maybe some days or some weeks, and maybe, I hope not, but maybe for a month or more, that we would be able to take care of ourselves as much as possible, or be able to pool our resources, which is food and fuel and other things that we need to survive. So this is a very important topic, one, because I live in the Pacific Northwest, where we are reminded almost daily in the media that we will have an earthquake, or Even if there was a tsunami that occurred off the coast of Oregon and Washington, maybe even California, with a resulting tsunami, we would have an influx of people. And that may be affecting us as residents of the Willamette Valley also. So no matter what your situation is, you should in some way be prepared. Everybody's county, state has emergency preparedness information available to you on the web and at the county health departments. Find out about that for wherever you live. So today we're going to talk about emergency preparedness with nutrient-dense foods. This is a wrapping of two very important topics. Not just emergency preparedness, but we're going to talk about nutrient-dense foods. These are the foods that will keep you alive. So in the event that you have to deal with an emergency or you have to feed yourself for a period of time, these are the foods that I would highly recommend or suggest that you consider having in your cupboards, at home and at work, and even in a backpack in your house that you could grab on the way out or in your car. Really just some very simple things that will, number one, help alleviate some stress that you would be feeling in a very stressful situation and alleviate any worry that you would have about feeding yourself for a period of time. I can assure you that, and I mean this in the kindest way, FEMA is not going to feed us. FEMA being the Federal Emergency Medical Aid or Association or whatever that A stands for, FEMA is not going to feed us nutrient-dense foods by any stretch of the imagination. Mostly what the people ate in the shelters I was in Lake Charles, and then interestingly enough, we were evacuated ourselves. We had to evacuate our shelter in Lake Charles and move up to Shreveport and Bossier City for the second hurricane that arrived while we were there, which was Hurricane Rita. So there was Hurricane Katrina and then Hurricane Rita. So I did learn a lot during that period of time, but what I primarily paid attention to, and I wasn't even celiac at this point or on a special diet, was that mostly what those people ate or were fed was really cheap filler food, a lot of grits and beans and rice and things that kept them alive, granted, but they were not very nutrient dense and they weren't very nutritious by any stretch of the imagination. So what we're going to shoot for today is a list of foods that you can keep in your cupboards that are in fact nutrient dense. And what does that mean? That pound for pound, that your body is going to be able to utilize the nutrients that are available in these foods. The list doesn't necessarily include very specific information on quantities because each person and each family is different. Please pay attention to that you should stock enough food for every member of your family for at least 72 hours. All of the food in this list are gluten-free and dairy-free, and for the most part, paleo. Additionally, almost all of these options are non-perishable. So you're going to have other things in your cupboards that are potentially perishable, and you're going to be able to eat those, and I highly recommend that you eat the perishable things first in the event of an emergency situation, and you have to go through prioritizing which food you're going to eat first. So it makes a huge difference if the electricity is out and your freezer is not going to be able to work. I highly recommend at that point that you have a party and use all of the meat or the things that you have in the freezer so they don't spoil. So let's just say you have some beef and some lamb and things. Start up a barbecue, have a party, make sure that people are fed, feed other people because those are the people that may help you in the future and be willing to share some of the food that they have. Let's just start about talking about protein since we started talking about the meat in your freezer. I highly recommend that people have protein bars, and those can be meat bars or pemmican bars. Some gelatin, which would be canisters of gelatin that you can get at any of the grocery stores, food co-ops, jerky, and that can be made with beef or turkey, many different meats. Make sure it doesn't have any soy sauce in it. Soy sauce or teriyaki is a source of contamination of the meat and not safe for people with gluten intolerance or celiac disease. Cans of tuna, sardines, and any other fish like salmon are great. Easy to eat and access. You don't have to cook them. And they're fabulous sources of super good high fat, which is long sustained energy. Any canned chicken or turkey, protein powders, and of course seaweed. That's an interesting one, but it's really lightweight. And so if you did have to pack a backpack on the go, you could throw some seaweed in there and it wouldn't take up very much space or weigh a lot, but it certainly would be nutrient dense. Then move into thinking about things like nuts and different types of nuts. So I would say pecans or pecans, however you want to say that one, walnuts, hazelnuts, pistachios. So many different kinds of nuts, and they do have different nutrition, but also super good energy for you. Let's just say you had to walk for a period of time to get somewhere else, and that would be long sustained energy that you would get from those nuts. Again, provided that you can eat nuts. Even in the event that you can eat nuts, such as tree nuts, I would suggest pumpkin seeds, pumpkin seed butter, very nutrient dense foods. Anything pumpkin seed is going to be very nutritious and very easy to get at any of the co-ops or grocery stores at this point. Chocolate bars. Yes, you get chocolate bars, provided they are 80 to 100% cocoa and not a lot of sugar and no milk. So 100% cocoa bars are really good medicine, high in iron, and can be very nutritious for us, even though it is chocolate. I also recommend taking some sources of sugar, and that would be honey, maple syrup, and molasses. Molasses, we know, is extremely nutrient dense and also has a lot of trace minerals that are very important to our bodies and our brains. So molasses, even though it is a sugar and refined and processed, it is actually one of the most nutrient-dense sugar supplies. Maple syrup is good if you can get it, especially if you're in the northeast corner of the world. We do have maple syrup here, and I do recommend 100% organic maple syrup from a reliable source. And honey. Honey is one of the foods that I have asterisked as a multi-purpose item. Number one, it is a sweetener. Number two, it can be used medicinally. And number three, it is a great antibacterial ointment. So you can put honey on a burn or a wound, and it is actually antibacterial. Coconut milk, coconut water, dehydrated coconut powder, and hemp milk are great liquids to have. The other thing with the coconut water is it is an electrolyte replacement. So if you had coconut water, let's just say you got a bug and you had vomiting or diarrhea. If you have coconut water on hand, that can keep you out of the hospital, which is a great idea, especially in an emergency situation. Actually, emergency departments would be the last place I would want to go in an emergency type situation. Try to be as self-reliant as you possibly can and stay out of those places, such as emergency departments and clinics, because they're going to be way overburdened. So if you can be somewhat self-reliant and stay away from the hospitals and whatnot, you're going to be helping the people that are really severely injured and also helping yourself by not getting exposed to certain bacteria that would be at some point rampant after a disaster. So definitely keep coconut water or dehydrated coconut powder on hand. Coconut milk is an excellent source of fat and nutrients. And then hemp milk is my next favorite. On this particular list, since it is for emergency preparedness, I do not have any of the hazelnut milk or almond milk, and certainly not soy milk or rice milk. Those are my least favorite, and they're very nutrient deficient. So stick with things that are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck as far as nutrients go and super good high fat. Fruit bars, dried fruit, fresh fruit, if you can get it. Again, we're kind of at this point triaging in the very beginning what we have available to us. So if you have fresh fruit, eat that first. Canned fruit, canned pumpkin. So if I had to pack a bag for myself, I would definitely include a can or two of canned pumpkin puree or canned sweet potato. Number one, that's an excellent source of fiber and also very nutrient dense, especially in vitamin A. Apple cider vinegar and baking soda are two other multi-purpose items. Please go on the internet and look up just put in 101 uses for apple cider vinegar, and you're going to get a whole bunch of lists of ways that you can use apple cider vinegar as both an antibacterial drink on your skin if you had a wound and you had to sanitize it or clean it up a little bit. Very dilute apple cider vinegar and water will help with that, be antibacterial. You can clean with apple cider vinegar. You can wash your hair with it. And the same thing with baking soda. So you can brush your teeth with it. You can wash your hair with it, provided you have enough water and you're not wasting it. You can scrub up things with it, and it neutralizes acid. So it's very useful in certain circumstances. Coconut oil, olive oil, tallow, lard. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we can get jars of tallow and lard and things, and duck fat. So I use those quite a bit, and I always have a good supply of them in the cupboards. Those are excellent fats. And if I had to choose any of these things that I would have on hand the most of, it would be coconut oil and olive oil. Those long burning energy oils and fats will give me enough energy and nutrients to stay alive. They're not very nutrient dense, but let's just say I had the coconut oil, olive oil, tallow, and lard, and some multivitamins, and some of these other foods available to me. Those would be the things that I would want to have the most of. I might not like them after the emergency was over and I'd eaten them for 2 weeks solid, and I might never want to see coconut oil again, but it would keep me alive. And that's the important thing at this point, is you want things that are going to keep you alive the longest. And if you don't need them, great. But if you happen to need, food for 2 or 3 weeks or a month or more, then these are the foods you really want to think about having on hand. And when I say that, I do have several jars of coconut oil in my cupboard, but I rotate those. I go through them, I use them, and then I replace them. So it's always rotating, just like in a grocery store. When people buy things, they replace them. They order them and replace them. I do the same thing in my cupboards. So I always have several jars of coconut oil, several jars of honey. I have molasses. I have the pumpkin seed butter, at least 7 containers of them. Because number one, I eat these things a lot because they are nutrient dense. But then in an emergency, if I get to shelter in place, which it means I get to shelter here at my home, then these foods are going to be readily available to me. Garlic, salt, pepper, turmeric, cinnamon, cloves, oregano, and ginger are great spices to have on hand. Many of them are anti-inflammatory. They can be used as antiseptics. They are very useful, not only as seasoning, but also medicinally. Ginger can be used for an upset stomach or nausea. So you want to make sure that in your cupboards you have these things readily available so that in the event of an emergency, you could either pack up a bag really quickly if you had to leave your house or already have that ready to go. Some other things you want to keep in mind is that you would want to have some multivitamins with you. And those would be things that you know that you can take and they don't make you sick, that they're certified gluten-free. I myself have all my vitamins and minerals and supplements that I take are pretty much from Country Life, which is certified gluten-free. And there's a couple other companies I really like, but that's the primary one I recommend because they're easily accessible. And the name of that company, again, is Country Life. They don't send me any money or product. I'm telling you this because that's what I use, and it is, at this point, a safe product for people that are celiac. I also want to point out that it's a good idea to have all of your prescription medications listed somewhere. That is in your emergency pack, on your cupboards, wherever it is that people, let's just say that you're injured and somebody has to come in your house and look for medications and help you out. You want to have those medications listed somewhere, several places. And if you have a wallet or a purse, have those also listed in those spots. Anywhere you can list those medications, it's a great hint to emergency medical personnel as they're trying to help you. I myself have what's called a road ID. So you can go to www.roadid.com and get a little tag that has your name on it, some contact information for people that would respond in an emergency for you. And also the fact that I am celiac, and it says no gluten ever. And because I'm a nurse and I have my own ideas about things, mine also says DNR, which means do not resuscitate. Just don't bother if I'm dead. That's fine. It's all good. So any pertinent information that you want to communicate very quickly to people, especially emergency personnel, put that on the road ID. And they're very cheap. They're like $20. It's on a bracelet or a shoe tag. So I highly recommend that, even if you have a Fitbit, they have a nice little tag that fits over the Fitbit. Since I'm a runner sometimes and a hiker and I'm outside, I like to have those bracelets on so that, you never know when things are going to happen. Just be prepared as possible. So this is very basic information about nutrient-dense foods, and there's a lot of preparation that can go into preparing for emergencies if that's what you want to do. And the more you investigate this, the more you realize, it's probably prudent and wise to have some type of plan in place, because it's really not a matter of if an emergency is going to happen, it's when, especially for those of us in the Pacific Northwest or anywhere there's a reservoir where the dam could break, which was another issue in Northern California recently where people got evacuated. So all you have to do is pay any attention to the news to realize really it is not just a matter of if an issue is going to come up, it's when. So preparation can alleviate a lot of our anxiety and help us to be more calm and to help people that maybe aren't as prepared or that do need a lot more help. So just as they say in the airplane, take care of yourself first and then help other people. This is just another opportunity to take care of ourselves and make sure that we have a lot of the things covered so that we decrease our own anxiety and stress and that we can actually function on an operational basis in the event of an emergency or some type of catastrophic event, because they do happen. So I'm going to go over a couple of other things that you want to think about having on hand and ready to go. If you're going to take any cans of food, unless it's a pop top or, just a peel back one, make sure you have a can opener. Some paper and wood, some type of heat source is always a good idea. Sleeping bags, blankets, pillows, flashlights, and make sure those flashlights have working batteries and that you have extra batteries. Socks and shoes, even if you're in your car and you get all dressed up and you have high heels on, please make sure that you throw in a pair of sneakers. In the event of an earthquake and a bridge goes out or 7 bridges go out and you have to walk or the roads are impassable because there's landslides or whatever, and you have to walk or hike, make sure that you have a very comfortable pair of shoes with you at all times. A first aid kit. I'm a nurse. I go see people in their homes on a regular basis. So I always have several emergency first aid kits that I travel with. And those do come in handy. Make sure you at least have some Band-Aids and some basics. I have a pretty extensive first aid kit in my car and ready to go. But I'm a nurse, and unless you're a nurse, you're probably not going to have the same supplies I have. Some types of waterproof containers, especially if you live in the Pacific Northwest where it tends to rain a lot. Even if it's not raining when the emergency occurs, I assure you in the next several hours or several minutes or several days, it will rain. So do make sure that you have waterproof containers. Always remember that if you get to shelter in place, either at home or at work, that any of the hot water heaters will be a great source of water. The other essentials that you would want to think about having would be things like shampoos that you can use, anything that goes on your skin, lotions, contact lenses, and glasses. So have an extra pair of glasses available to you. They don't have to be pretty, but they do have to work. If I lose my contacts or my glasses, I'm going to be essentially blind. That's just me. I'm lucky that way. And so I have to make sure that I have contacts available to me and glasses. And then because of that, of the contacts, I would have to have contact solution also. So think that through. What do you take when you travel? What's the most useful? What are you in trouble with if you forget to pack it? Those are the things that you need in your emergency preparedness kit. The other thing I want to mention a little bit is about money. Please keep some cash available to you at home so that in the event of an emergency, you have cash available. Let's just say the electricity goes out and you can't get money from an ATM and your bank is closed. All kinds of things can happen. Doesn't have to be a lot, but it should be some cash at your home so that if you had to buy emergency supplies while they were still there, that you could do that. If you have pets, please keep them in mind also. So in the event of an emergency, do you have enough pet food, such as for your cat or your dog? And is it appropriate for them in the emergency type situation? So make sure that they are taken care of as far as food and water also, and that you have taken any dogs or cats that you have in your home into account. Now, as I say that, I don't have any dogs right now, but I do have some emergency dog food on hand. What we also realized in Katrina and Rita was that the animals were displaced also. So it's much nicer to be able to feed a dog or a cat that is lost and has lost their people and maybe scared, just as scared or more scared than you are, and not able to take care of themselves, that you are able to just share some of the things that you have with them so that they don't get frightened and that they don't starve to death. So a lot of things to think about. This is one of my favorite classes to teach. All over the United States, I've given this emergency preparedness class, and it's very well received. If you would like me to come to your area and do this class, please just let me know. We can make arrangements. It is one of my favorite things to do to help people be prepared and alleviate stress, give people hope that, while things might be hard right now, that they can get relatively easy in a short period of time with proper preparation. And the same goes for people that have had to suddenly go on a gluten-free diet. That can be very stressful. One of my main goals is to make that not so stressful or to help make that transition easier. So here we are, episode 15, talking about emergency preparedness with nutrient-dense foods. And you know what? I have thought of a few more things that I need to go shopping for to make sure that I have those things in my cupboard again because they got a little low. So hopefully this was a good review for you and your family to think about as far as, what is in your cupboard? Are those things going to keep you alive for a period of time, or should you reevaluate that? Hopefully this was helpful and gave you some great ideas as far as what would be useful in an emergency and how you can better prepare for an emergency situation. I'd like to thank Tim the podcasting guy for being my executive producer and editing all of the episodes of the Gluten-Free RN. Thanks again, Tim. You're fabulous. And also a huge thank you to Pulse Media Network for helping me spread the word about gluten intolerance and celiac disease through a fabulous network of nursing podcasters that are very supportive and give me great feedback. Speaking of feedback, thank you to the people that have already commented on the iTunes page and reviewed the Gluten-Free RN podcast for me. All of the reviews are read by me and hugely appreciated. So if you hear this podcast and you really like it, please leave a review. I will happily read it. And if there's any feedback that's necessary, I'll get back to you. This is Nadine Groskowiak, Gluten-Free RN, signing out on episode 15, which I think is a fascinating topic, emergency preparedness with nutrient-dense foods. Stay tuned for more great information on the next episode of Gluten-Free RN. Thank you, and this is just a reminder. If you think celiac disease doesn't affect you, your family, and your friends, think again. Let's talk again soon and stay healthy. Bye for now.